You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Truck Weather Bulletin for August 19th, live. Well, here we are, another day in the wide world of tropics to say, and it's quite active with 3 Category 1s active, and a remnant. Of course, we have Hurricanes Grace and Henri, Hurricane Linda, which is weakening finally, and of course the remnants of 16W, which continue westward and still have a chance of reformation. It's day 80 of Atlantic hurricane season, and we have Grace and Anri. Of course, both of them Category 1s at the moment. Grace is going to be making landfall tonight in the Yucatan Peninsula, and Anri now poses a threat to the New England coast of the United States. 3 hurricanes are now the total of this season so far. It's day 96 of Eastern Pacific hurricane season. Linda there is finally weakening, and it should be the final time that does do that. And of course, an AOI that happens to be the remnants of Grace. As soon as Grace crosses back into the Eastern Pacific, it does have a chance of redevelopment. In the Western Pacific, we're looking out for 16W, which is back up to a 70% chance of reformation after recent trends have provided such upgrade to happens. And of course, the JTWC has issued a tropical cyclone formation alert for this to reform. We'll be watching that closely. In the North Indian Ocean, we're looking at nothing going on over here as to be expected for this time of year, considering the fact that, of course, we are still in mid-August, and that does not exactly meet the timings of the seasons here. Of course, we have those two peaks there, and we are in between right now. Here's the Atlantic satellite imagery. You can see the 2 hurricanes there. You can see Grace. Recon is flying into that right now and still supports around 80 miles an hour. It is going to be making landfall late tonight. And then, of course, Andrei there south of Bermuda will be experiencing some wind shear for the next day or so. In the Eastern Pacific, you can see Linda there. Its eye practically collapsing in the latest few frames there, as of course it is entering a much more stable and cooler environment. It is expected that Linda is done strengthening finally, and it is expected that weakening continues. However, it may threaten Hawaii as a post-tropical cyclone. In the Western Pacific, you can kind of see the remnants of 16W that are trying to reform there. That is to the east of the Philippines. Still got some work to go, but of course we are seeing some of those redevelopment trends ongoing at the moment. We will see what goes on with that. And then of course, moving on over to the North Indian Ocean imagery that comes up right next after this. We have the monsoonal activity continuing across portions of the Bay of Bengal. The Arabian Sea, of course, looking mostly dry as usual. Basically, the common traits as to what we've been seeing the last 2 months, with the exception of that land depression that we had a while ago. And then, of course, the floater imagery with the 2 hurricanes in full display there. Grace on the southwestern end of your screen that's been going through the Cayman Islands, now targeting the Yucatan Peninsula. And then, of course, Anri there on the top right, that is continuing to move towards the west with a slight nudge to the south still, pretty much now at the latitude of Florida. In the Eastern Pacific, sea surface temperatures remain around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius for a majority of the basin, although of course near the Mexican coast it's 30, where Linda is right now it's only around 26. In the Atlantic, we're looking at those 30 degrees Celsius temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, where Grace will be heading into. Other than that, it's 28 and 29 degrees Celsius for a majority of it. That is the temperature that Anri will be heading into until around day 4 and 5, when it is expected to weaken, before potentially making an extremely close pass, if not landfall, on the New England coast. And then, of course, the North Indian Ocean, we are seeing those temperatures around 30 degrees Celsius appear a little bit more across the northern Bay of Bengal. Otherwise, the Arabian Sea remains quite chilly as you head westwards, with areas still around 23 to 24 degrees Celsius. And then, of course, as you head into the Western Pacific, it's still around 29 to 30 degrees Celsius for a majority of the basin. Of course, most of the 30 degrees Celsius are confined in the Philippine Sea or west of the Hainan Peninsula. Going on over to the sea surface temperature anomalies, we are still looking at those enso-neutral conditions continuing. Of course, we also have the Atlantic warmer than average for the most part. The Gulf Stream extremely warm compared to average, and then of course the subtropics and the eastern Pacific as well. Well, we are joined by my team. Of course, we are starting off with discussion on Grace. Of course, Recon is currently flying into that at the moment as of the 8 p.m. advisory. Well, let me get that real quick. I have, of course, do these tropical weather bulletins right before the 8 p.m. advisory comes out. So, we usually wait to see that. But in the meantime, we have our contributors with us today. We have Amethyst, Dakota, Sam, Noah, as well as myself presenting Xavier Burns. And how are you guys doing today?
You forgot me.
Oh yeah, and we have Christian. The webcam kind of messed things, but Christian is also here.
I've been doing good.
Yes. Yeah, I'm fine.
So, looking at what we have in terms of the 8 p.m. advisory, of course, this is the intermediate. Grace is now an 80-mile-an-hour Category 1 hurricane with a pressure of 989 millibars. It's moving to the west-northwest at 16 miles an hour. And, of course, it is expected to strengthen a little bit more. An 85-mile-an-hour peak is what the National Hurricane Center is forecasting before this does make landfall late tonight or early tomorrow morning. So we are looking at that at the moment. Of course, that is a prominent threat at the moment. The next advisory on Anri, of course, not coming until 11 p.m. Eastern. They still have it as a 70-mile-an-hour tropical storm at the moment. So what have you been seeing with Grace, and what is it expected forecast, and what we're going to be seeing with the structure of this over the next 12 hours?
Can anyone hear me? From what I'm seeing with Grace, it's really gotten its act together in the past few hours. I mean, this dog is wondering what the heck who I'm talking to. Yeah, it's really gotten itself together, basically. I mean, there's no other explanation for it. Oh, hello, puppy. Sorry. Yeah. Oh dear.
Christian, of course, dealing with a little canine friend of his. Noah, you've been looking at Grace very closely. What have you been seeing with the structure? Oh, did not expect that. I'm sure he'll be back soon, but in the meantime, as right now, we are looking at a slightly stronger storm than what we were dealing with earlier. Of course, National Hurricane Center upgraded this at 11 a.m. and we've been seeing pressure drops from Recon. Of course, we did have it at around 993 or 994 millibars, but Recon found it to be around 989 millibars, and of course, some recent Recon evidence supports the fact it may be down to 988 millibars now. So that is something that we've been having to monitor. Of course, I'm going to be seeing if the code is pulled up. I'm pretty sure it is. Sam's got it there. This is the latest cone on Hurricane Grace. This is from the 8 p.m. intermediate advisory. You can see those tropical storm watches remaining in effect for parts of western Cuba. The hurricane warnings in effect across portions of the Yucatan Peninsula. Tropical storm warnings across the western end of the Yucatan as well as the northern end, as well as areas south of the warning. I'm sure Christian eventually, when he does get himself up situated, or Sam can pull up the warning and watch locations. But as of right now, we're expecting an 85-mile-an-hour landfall on the Yucatan Peninsula some point late tonight. After that, it is expected to weaken, of course, as it moves inland. That is typically what you would expect with these kinds of hurricanes. Obviously, land interaction does tend to hurt these cyclones. And then as it emerges into the Bay of Campeche, we are likely to be seeing intensification resume. And of course, with those very warm sea surface temperatures, it is likely that it does re-attain a peak of 85 miles an hour once again, before making its landfall again some point Friday night into Saturday morning. So that is what we are looking at with that. We also have Anri. Sam, could you get us the cone on Anri, because I feel like that is another storm.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned me having my canine friend troubles. I'm not sure what I'm able to do because he's literally right on top of me right now.
Yeah, considering we already have
You
our
want
fair
the cone
troubles
for
with
Henri?
mittens, that's okay.
You want the cone
Well,
for
I mean, I'm
Henri?
on webcam. If you want to show the stream, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Xavier, you said you wanted the cone for Henri? Alright, hold on.
I just
And here we are. Here's
is,
the radar. You can see that eye there. That's been shown on radar, of course, indicating the strength of this. Of course, definitely a significant situation we're looking at in terms of what we are seeing right now. It is expected to continue to intensify. Very high oceanic heat content. The main issues, of course, being wind shear and some relatively dry air that it's been dealing with. Other than that, if it weren't for that, we probably would have been looking at a more serious situation. So it is definitely a good thing for the Yucatan Peninsula here that we've been seeing some of the intrusions there. So hopefully that does maintain, because obviously we don't want a stronger storm hitting the Yucatan. But of course, as we always say with any kind of natural event, hope for the best, but obviously prepare for the worst. If you have not prepared for this hurricane, you should have done so by now. These hurricane warnings and watches were issued either a day or two ago, and that was the time you should have been making sure that you were prepared. You've been in the cone for days now, and obviously if you are not taking those necessary precautions, you're only hurting yourself in the end. Looking at the other situation we're dealing with, the latest cone on Tropical Storm Anri, or as we have it, Hurricane Anri, it is a lot farther west than what we had last night in terms of the shift towards the west of the cone. As of now, it is now forecast to become a hurricane by their classification no later than Friday morning, and at that point it will be going into some better conditions, strengthening to nearly Category 2 status before it takes a turn towards the north there, potentially impacting New England as a high-end tropical storm or low-end hurricane. So that is something we've been monitoring there. The shift in the models has been significant compared to what we were seeing 24 to 48 hours ago. We were seeing those models in the cone really take this out to sea, maybe potentially impact Bermuda again. But over the last few hours, or well, last 18 hours in general, we've just been seeing a massive shift towards the west. This latest advisory pushed this to the west by 150 miles. So of course, Henri is, just like Grace, another significant threat that we are having to watch here. Even New York City is in the cone as of right now as well. And this goes, of course, up to Augusta, Maine. So that is what we're looking at. Millions of people in the cone now at this point. And as this continues to shift west, that number is going to only increase. So that is something that New England there, if you live there, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Eastern New York, Long Island, even New Jersey, that is something you guys need to be watching out for, even if you are in Nova Scotia. That is also something. Regardless, we're going to be looking at rip currents all across the Mid-Atlantic and New England coast, so that is another thing to be mindful of. And just looking at those sea surface temperatures at the moment, we are looking at some pretty good sea surface temperatures for this. Obviously, the oranges in this specific graphic denote those of 24, so obviously the conditions were not exactly supportive of development in this specific area there near the Azores and the Madeira Islands. However, once you go into those reds, all those reds are around 27 to 28 degrees Celsius. And then once you get into the Gulf of Mexico, where Grace is going to be heading into, those temperatures are significantly warmer, around 31 degrees Celsius, so definitely very supportive to help those cyclonic conditions there in terms of when Grace does get there. So that is, of course, something we're going to be having to monitor very much heavily as we head closer, of course, to land threats, two that can pack a punch very easily in different ways. Of course, New England is not very known for tropical cyclone landfalls. The last storm that hit there was, of course, Isaias and Faye of last year. We did deal with Elsa this year, but by that point it was pretty much nearly extratropical. And of course, as of right now, the cone for Anri takes it about 30 miles an hour stronger than what Elsa did. So that is definitely not a great situation, especially after some of the reports that came in after Elsa there, in terms of the flooding, especially in New York City there. So definitely not good news at all. And then, of course, before 2020, New England had really not seen anything in terms of tropical cyclones since years and years prior. So this is really not an area that is typically used to seeing these kinds of landfalls. And of course, if we have to look at this, this is not a normal angle to see these storms come from. Normally you see storms coming from the Caribbean or from the Gulf and skirting their way upwards. But this is a completely different storm. Obviously, this storm had formed to the northeast of Bermuda, has since gone down to the southeast, turned south, then turned to the southwest. So this is a very odd track that we are seeing, especially for this time of year. So it is definitely something that we have to keep our eyes closely peeled on, especially with the model guidance and the fact that the cone of uncertainty is very much massive. If it takes that western end, we're talking about the eastern coast of Maryland, of course Delaware, New Jersey being impacted by this. And then if you talk about the eastern side of things, then obviously it's going to be less impacts towards really all the U.S. and most of the are going to be towards Nova Scotia and Newfoundland as an extratropical cyclone. So that is something that we have to look at here. There are two distinct scenarios of what could happen here, but unfortunately the models have been trending towards the west, more towards a landfall somewhere near New England or just off the coast of the New England coast. So that is something we are stuck having to monitor. As I mentioned earlier, if you lived anywhere near there, please monitor the latest. Of course, the National Weather Service local offices have started issuing products and stuff for that. Weather balloons are being deployed, and of course, recon is now being sent into this, given the threat that we are now seeing for the U.S. As we had a lot of questions last night, of course, we're going to be answering those questions that you have. So if you want to give us a head start, please remember to tag us at Force13 on the live chat. That will pop our name up in orange, and that will give us the ability to see those messages much more clear, and it will be able to get us to look at these messages that you guys are giving us. So that is up to you guys. If you want to give us questions, and if anyone else has any thoughts about the current situation and what advice people should heed, feel free to do so.
Okay.
We have a very quiet crowd tonight.
Yeah, sorry.
Are we still in there?
Again, my canine friend is literally falling asleep on me right now.
Xavier, are we still in there?
Yes, we're currently on air until 9.
Yes, we're
Nice. I'll put something in chat then, because, I don't know.
Well, you can ask us here. I mean, you can if you have a question, since you are, of course, not that known, so you could also be like
Yeah,
our
this
viewer
is
that...
This is my first live appearance on the channel, so I apologize if I'm asking some pretty stupid questions. But, how long
honestly,
is the
that's
delay
fine.
between us talking now and the tropical weather bulletin showing it? Or
15 seconds.
It's yeah.
Because I have the
So,
tropical weather
again,
bulletin pulled up and I can't hear anything.
It's well, you right. Yeah. I'm trying my best here, guys, right now. Again, this dog is insane right now. He just woke up.
Alright, well, it does appear that the chat does hear us, because we did just get an influx of questions, so I think it's just something on your end, Sam.
Yeah.
But,
chat, remember to tag us with @Force13 for it to light up in bright orange.
okay.
That way you'll get your question noticed.
Alright,
And if I see any questions about my dog, then they're not going to get answered. I'm sorry.
anyways, as I was trying to, because every time I try to talk, I open my mic and then it echoes. But as of right now, we have a whole bunch of questions, so we're gonna get through those. The first one was from Jason Bourne, interesting name. Could Grace snag the Category 2 tag right before landfall? That seems pretty doubtful at this point. It is.
Probably. I mean, what do we have it for? No, I mean.
We're going with 90.
Forecasted as?
We're going with 90.
We're going with 90.
Although at this,
90.
although
Okay.
that might be a little bit generous, though. Basically, this has been a
so-
very slow intensifier as a hurricane so far, and given the fact that, of course, we are approaching landfall in less than 12 hours at this point, it seems very unlikely that this will get to Category 2 in the Yucatan Peninsula. But, however, that chance cannot be ruled out in the Gulf of Mexico. All depends on what structure we see as it exits its course. The next question from CMC Official. Possible of Grace rapidly intensifying as it's over 30 degrees Celsius waters with low wind shear. Well, yeah, it's under 30 degrees Celsius temperatures, but the wind shear is actually not low. It's more towards the moderate side of things. You're seeing about 10 to 15 knots of shear there.
I mean, again, it's not just sea surface temperatures that can intensify a storm. Again, this storm is currently undergoing wind shear as well, quite a lot, quite a bit even, and that can hinder a storm's intensification phase as well. So we don't count on it RIing anytime soon.
It's also dealing with some dry air too, because the relative humidity levels are not even really at 50% with this thing.
On a slightly unrelated note, I restarted my
Yeah,
YouTube.
again, you've got sea surface temperatures. You've got sea surface temperatures, dry air, as well as wind shear, which can either help or hinder a storm's intensification.
Indeed. Okay, going up to our next question here. This is from Hurricane 7. Do you think Grace and Henri could be majors? If I had to speak my mind about that, I would personally think that if anything had a chance of being major, which honestly I don't think both of these at all will become majors, Andrei probably has the better shot at this point. More of the models actually indicate a stronger Henri than Grace at this point. Much of the multi-model consensus has really gone down in terms of Grace forecasting either a very low-end Cat 2 at best or high-end Cat 1. Henri, however, is interesting, as we could be saying some of that intensification all depends on the track that we see out of this. As of right now, our latest cone actually did take this up to Category 2. That, of course, was made by our very own Thomas Schwen earlier today. We did forecast 100 miles an hour. Of course, our social media account, our Twitter, at least at Force13, did post that cone earlier if you want to take a look at that. But as of right now, we do not forecast a major with any of these. Our next question, at Force13, how strong do you think... Oh, we kind of answered that question already. We said we were forecasting 100. Bobby DeSault asked what made Anri take such a U-turn. Is the steering weak in that area? Henri's been quite...
It's been traveling west this whole time, hasn't it?
No, actually it started... when it formed, it was moving to the south-southeast, and then it moved south, and then it turned to the southwest, and then west. In a way, it's making an open 6, kind of curl thingamajiggy.
Alright. This will be interesting.
Well, I'm pulling up what's going on so I can try to answer that question, because, of course, we all know Anri has been quite the interesting storm so far. In terms of what we are seeing, the reason it started like this, I'll talk about what it means to the future track earlier. But as of right now, what we are seeing is the fact that it's being steered around that mid-level ridge that was centered off the coast of the Carolinas, and that was allowing for that very slow clockwise turn to occur south of the Bermuda there. What's causing it now, that's causing it to turn north, is the fact that a high-pressure system will be setting itself up towards the Ohio Valley in the northeast, while another high sets itself up to the east of Anri, which is now going to be this driving factor of keeping Anri from going out to sea, because obviously that is now looking like less and less of a possibility there. So it's going to be steered in one direction. That's going to be towards the north. It's not going to be something that just dives itself towards the west or northwest for long. It's just going to turn west and make that gradual turn to the north. How much it turns to the north or northeast, that is still a bit of a question, of course, as we have been dealing with model guidance not exactly being the best with this at the moment. There's just quite a bit of uncertainty as to what we're going to be seeing with that. So that is going to be an evolving forecast, and of course, let me pull up the imagery on that Dakota has there. But yeah, you can see it's doing a pretty good job firing some convection, so that definitely isn't a problem. The reason it's probably just not going to intensify is the fact it's also dealing with some shear, although it's going to be offset by the other environmental conditions, which is why it's probably not going to be weakening much, if at all, over the next day or so. But once it gets past that, then it's game on for that short window it does have to get pretty more in terms of its hurricane intensity. So 100 miles an hour, that does make it Category 2, and that is what we are, of course, forecasting at this time. Oh dear goodness, that's a lot of questions, so I'm trying to get through this right now. Sorry if I do skip past questions. I'm trying to. There's a lot of these. What are the chances of Grace becoming a Cat 2? Well, we've pretty much gone over that. It's it's probably around a 40, not even that, 30, 70 at this point. Another question: when will Tropical Storm Anri become a Cat 1 hurricane? Well, we actually do have it as a Category 1 right now. The National Hurricane Center doesn't have it becoming one until Friday morning. So at the very absolute latest, it will definitely be a hurricane on the National Hurricane side of things by Friday morning. Very early Friday morning to say. So probably maybe the Thursday night. Well, let's see here. Mr. Green and Purple asks, Force 13, are you sensing any similarities to Sandy, Irene, or any other significant northeast hurricanes with Henri's track? Well, I mean, to put it quite simply, this is a different storm compared to what we have typically seen with any kind of northeast cyclone. Like, as I said earlier, with tracks of these, you typically don't see any kind of storm that literally forms to the northeast of Bermuda and ends up hitting the U.S., especially with a track like this. This is just an extremely uncommon track that we're seeing here. And of course, if this does become a hurricane, or even without that, this is the most west that we've seen two storms this strong together in the Atlantic this far west and this early in the season since 1901. So like I said, this is not exactly a normal situation we're dealing with at all here for this August 18th. So I don't think there's really any good analog to compare the storm with because of how different this is. What I can say, however, is that it is likely that Henri does expand in size as it does strengthen and go up the Gulf Stream. So that is likely something that we're going to be seeing. It's just it's just that we cannot say this is going to be Sandy or Irene or any kind of that. Obviously, Sandy was a very complex storm with very complex environmental conditions that allowed it to get to the feet that it did. But it's just way too bullish to really say that this has an analog, because honestly, this really doesn't have one. Another question. I'm from Yarmouth, NS. I haven't seen a direct landfall since Arthur 2014. Looks like I might have to prepare for a possible landfall. I was saving NS as Nova Scotia. It might be extratropical by then. If that's Nova Scotia, you probably have seen storms there. It's just that they were probably extratropical, so probably prepare for another extratropical landfall on that. Another question. This is what are the colors on Anri? So of course this is infrared imagery that we're seeing, and this is basically representing the cloud tops that we are seeing with this. Right now you can see that we are seeing some pretty good amounts of areas that are seeing those minus 70 degrees Celsius and minus 80 degrees Celsius cloud tops. Obviously, the colder those are, it usually means the more deeper convection it is producing. So obviously, with how large this blob of minus 70 plus is, it's definitely producing some very serious convection at the moment, and it's definitely some very healthy convection to say the least. Obviously, if it's going to consolidate and get itself an eye, then obviously it's going to have to get itself its center back. We did have an eye appearing on visible satellite imagery, but it seems it has since receded, and we're probably not going to be seeing an eye come out for a little bit to come, obviously, as it continues to deal with that shear. Okay, another one, since we of course should touch on Linda briefly as well. This is what effects will Linda have on Hawaii? There was, of course, the fact that Linda has been an extremely stubborn tropical cyclone since it became an annual hurricane. Which is weakening very slow at this point, refusing to weaken at times as well.
Yeah. If I'm correct, I believe parts of Hawaii are in Linda's Cone.
Yep, parts of Hawaii are indeed under Linda's Cone, although this is for the post-tropical phase for it.
Yeah.
So, my biggest thing, this is mainly for the islands west of the Big Island, of course. The Big Island should be spared from it for the most part. Obviously, rip currents could be an issue, but other than that, maybe some rain, some gusty winds. It all depends on the track, because obviously it's still around 5 days out before we see a landfall there, and of course we will be providing live coverage on all these storms for the days to come as long as Grace and Anri remain a threat, and that's the case that we will be remaining live every night for tropical weather bulletins or just general commentary in general for the next few nights, so we should have a better idea with those. Another question, are we on a weak La Nina? Technically, not right now. We do have a La Nina watch, but as of right now, we're still classified in an ENSO neutral pattern. It is likely that we do, or it's pretty much a good chance that we do go back to a La Nina at some point this fall. Another question, will Andrei have a chance to go even more west? That actually can't be ruled out. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but the models have continued to shift towards the west, although it looks like they have stopped shifting west with the newest model guidance, so that is actually a good sign. So it looks like we're starting to get a better grip as to where this is going to be going. However, it doesn't mean we can doesn't mean we can say that for good that this isn't going to be shifting anymore to the west. It's still a bit of uncertainty with this, and there's still a bit of ways to go before we can really rule out areas to see. But if you live on the Mid-Atlantic to the northeast to anywhere, especially the New England coastline, please watch the storm very carefully, especially if you're on Long Island northeastwards. That is basically my best thing I could say with that. Connor Campbell says, does Grace give you Franklin 2017 vibes? I had a feeling a 2017 question would be showing up on this stream, of course. Obviously, 2017 has proven to be an analog for this year, as mentioned by even the top predictors like the Colorado State University. So, that definitely... not a good thing that we're talking about 2017 right now, but I'll briefly touch on it for the sake of things. Obviously, Franklin 2017 did not form until around northeast of Honduras and all, and it became a tropical storm. It made a landfall on the Yucatan as a tropical storm. So in terms of its track, yes, it's in a way similar, but what we saw with Franklin is not exactly what we're going to be seeing with Grace. Obviously, Grace formed much farther to the east than Franklin did, and of course, A, we're expecting a landfall as a hurricane in the Yucatan, and B, we're expecting the stronger landfall than what Franklin was in 2017. That and the fact that there's actually a possible chance that this actually reforms in the Eastern Pacific. It all depends on what happens with that circulation. If it manages to keep its circulation, if it reforms in the Eastern Pacific, it would get the name of Grace again. If not, it would get the name of Marty, unless some surprise storm forms in the Eastern Pacific, although, of course, that is the only area of investigation at the moment. Another odd question, could Fred reform near Canada? No. This thing is extratropical at the point, and if it enters water, it's going to be in extremely cool temperatures. It's not going to be reforming at all.
It's
No.
not. It will not reform, no. Absolutely not.
Yeah, there's no chance it's gonna happen.
That is a 0% chance of
There
that
is
happening.
no chance. Like Xavier mentioned, if it does somehow reform, it will be over incredibly cold waters, which is not good for reformation. So the answer is no. Take it or leave it.
Another question that we had, if Henri makes landfall near Long Island or Cape Cod, what will the sea surface temperatures be? And is there a chance it could become post-tropical before making landfall, depending on those sea surface temperatures? Well, if you're thinking this is going to be post-tropical before it makes landfall or anything, this is not going to be the case this time. Sea surface temperatures are still going to be around 25 to 26 as it continues towards the north there, and of course the Gulf Stream has proven to be very warm. and very supportive. Those temperatures are 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, so there is definitely no chance of it being post-tropical when it does make its approach. It could be starting transition, possibly at the very absolute extreme end of things in terms of extratropical transition, but it will not be a post-tropical cyclone. This is definitely going to be something that does get issued tropical cyclone warnings as a result. So this is going to be like Sandy, where it was extratropical before landfall or anything like that. CMC official, you say thoughts of the possible cyclone in, but you don't finish that sentence, and I don't think we can really give you an answer to that. Will Grace cross into the Eastern Pacific as a remnant low?
That's what they're predicting right now, aren't they?
I think the latest cone from 5 p.m. Eastern actually has it going just at the end of the Mexican coast there, but not exactly reaching the Eastern Pacific yet. But it's still a little bit too early to say. There's two scenarios of what can happen here, and obviously the National Hurricane Center in terms of the Eastern Pacific region is monitoring for this. That's why we have that new AOI, 20%, unless that did go up in the latest outlook. I'm not sure at the moment. Let me see if it did. Basically, this is what they said. It's 30% now, but this is what they said. They said Hurricane Grace, located over the Northwestern Caribbean Sea, is forecast to move inland over mainland Mexico early Saturday morning and dissipate over Mexico on Sunday. So what this would mean is that they are forecasting it to lose its circulation before it exits off the coast. They're saying that, however, the remnants are expected to continue westward into the eastern Pacific Ocean, and an area of low pressure could form by early next week. So basically, in terms of what they're saying here, they're saying that the center of Grace is expected to dissipate as Grace continues to move further inland. Of course, it's going to rapidly weaken as it interacts with those mountains. And once it reemerges in the eastern Pacific with the remnant moisture, the remnant cloud mass, and all that stuff, there is a possibility that it is able to gain itself a new circulation. Obviously, with the naming protocol, if it were to, in the grand scheme of things, if it, in the very, very, very slim chance it were to retain its circulation and reform in the Eastern Pacific, it will get the name of Grace again. However, the most likelihood scenario in this situation is if it gets a new circulation, it will get the name of the next Eastern Pacific name. So that is what we are looking at here in terms of the possible aspects of Grace there, in terms of where it's going to be tracking towards. We have Christian's imagery pulled up, and that is, of course, the key messages on Grace. Just to go through these real quick. Hurricane conditions and dangerous storm surge are expected in portions of the hurricane warning area in the eastern Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, beginning late tonight or early Thursday. Preparations to protect life and property should, of course, be rushed to completion if they haven't already. Obviously, this is a dangerous storm. We do not want to be caught in that. There is an increasing risk of hurricane conditions and dangerous storm surge in portions of eastern mainland Mexico beginning late Friday. A hurricane watch will likely be issued for this part of the area tonight. Through the weekend, heavy rainfall across the Cayman Islands as well as portions of the Yucatan Peninsula and Veracruz State should lead to flat and urban flooding. Addition, the heavy rainfall from Grace will be capable of producing mudslides in Veracruz. So that is, of course, the key messages we are saying with this specific storm. On the right there, you can see the cone, and then, of course, the tropical storm force wind probabilities there, all the way up to 60 or 70% now. Tropical storm force winds in the western Mexico corridor. That is going to be going up as we get more confidence. But as of right now, if it's in the Yucatan Peninsula, you're definitely going to be seeing tropical storm force winds. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. Prepare for that if you haven't already. You probably should have by now, if not completing it now. And of course, those are the cone. You want to get the warnings so that way we can read those off, Christian?
The warnings.
Yippers.
Let me try. I haven't got those pulled up right now, so let me see what I can do. I'm trying.
Just go to. No. Go to home. Go back to National Hurricane Center home.
Oh, I know. Oh, I've got it. I will do if the internet wants to work again. I'm trying. I'm clicking home.
Alright, well, it looks like that's gonna take a little bit here. Unfortunately, Christian doesn't have the best internet in the world, so sometimes it takes things a little bit slow.
You'll have to come back.
Okay. Alright, we'll answer some questions in the meantime, and go back to the other stream.
You'll have to come back to me. Oh, you're not making this any easier.
Alright, so I've got it back to the radar imagery for the short term here. Then we got a few more questions, so that should work out in the end there. What do you think the most likely outcome of, as well as the worst possible outcome for Anri as right now? Best case scenario, well, if I just go through the best since you didn't specify there. Best case scenario for Henri is that it does go to the eastern end of the cone, or possibly go more east of it, and spares pretty much the entire New England coast there. What is likely to happen at the moment is that we're going to be seeing some impacts across most of New England, as well as rip currents across the entire seaboard. And the worst case scenario, which obviously we're not going to be forecasting, would be that it goes extremely west, makes landfall in New Jersey, and basically causes a lot of issues for a significant portions of the Northeast and Northeastern Mid-Atlantic. So that is definitely the worst case scenario. That's probably not what we're going to be seeing. The models have actually backed off on some of those New Jersey ones. So hopefully that is something that stays. We don't need any more westward shifts. That is definitely for sure there.
Okay, hopefully I've got what you asked. Hopefully it works now.
Alright, there we go. We got the warnings that are currently in effect. A hurricane warning is in effect for the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico from Cancun to Punta Herrero. That includes Cozumel. A tropical storm warning is in effect from the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico from north of Cancun to Campeche. And of course the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico from south of Punta Herrero to Puerto Costa Maya. A tropical storm watch is in effect for the southern coast of the Cuban province of Pinar del Rio, as well as Isla de Juventud. So that is what we are looking at in terms of the watches and warnings. Of course, we are still looking out for that hurricane watch to be issued across portions of Mexico, west of the Bay of Campeche later tonight. Probably with the next advisory that comes out, if not the one after. So that is, of course, something that we are going to be expecting in the next few hours here. And there we go. Here's the oceanic heat content that we are seeing here, and of course it's definitely pretty good and under where Grace is currently. That is what's been helping it right now. A little bit less in the Gulf of Mexico, but of course those temperatures overall are going to be warmer in the Gulf of Mexico. There are a lot more areas that you're going to be seeing 31 degrees Celsius temperatures. That is why it's expected to rebound back to where it was. But overall, we're looking at those very high oceanic heat content values in the Caribbean. And that is definitely going to be the thing that's going to be supporting it and offsetting that shear and dry air that we've been seeing. So if there's anything that's been helping out with that, that is, of course, that very, very high oceanic heat content, up to 150 kilojoules a centimeter squared there. So that is something that we've definitely been watching with this one. It looks like it's right above that pocket of the maximum oceanic heat content right now. So that is definitely interesting. Another question, will Anri strengthen till landfall? Well, we don't even know if it is going to make landfall. Of course, the landfall isn't even certain yet. However, if it does make landfall in New England, it will not be strengthening up to landfall. What's going to go on is that those cooler sea surface temperatures around day 4, which would technically be the day before it would make landfall, are going to be decreasing as you head further northward, and by that happening, that's going to weaken the storm down, because obviously those TCs need warmer temperatures in order to thrive, and obviously if it is under the 26 degrees Celsius isotherm especially, then you're not going to be seeing strengthening at all. So Anri will not be a storm that strengthens up to landfall. It will peak, weaken, and then make landfall if it does, but of course a landfall is not guaranteed. That is all I can say right now. How much rainfall in New England from Anri? Again, that's a giant question. Model spread remains significantly uncertain. It is way too uncertain to make a forecast on terms of rainfall at the moment. Do you think that Anri could stall near the coast and cause more than 6 inches to fall? Anri's not stalling. Jason Bourne asked, does Grace have a pinhole eye? Well, in order to have a really pinfall eye, it would require it to actually have an eye, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, it hasn't really been doing a great job in producing an eye at the moment here. So that is something that we've been having to monitor there. Of course, we'll see what happens, but if the eye it did appear to have on satellite imagery was definitely not a pinhole. Do you think Anri will rapidly intensify and become a Cat 4? I may see why you're asking this, because of some of the models like CTCX and H-Warf and Coamps and all that stuff, but that is a very, very unlikely scenario. Another question, did hurricanes hit Europe before? Well, technically they've hit as extratropical cyclones, but no storm has made landfall in the UK or Ireland or anything like that. The one landfall that we do have as a TC would be, of course, Alpha of 2020, which did affect Portugal as a subtropical storm. So that is the only one that we've had to affect Europe. Still tropical, or subtropical, that is.
Yeah, I don't think any systems have made landfall in Europe. Still tropical, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Christian, if you want, since you're of course you're in Europe, you can explain why that is extremely unlikely that there has been.
Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. Where the UK is, it's about 50 degrees north in latitude and longitude. That doesn't really seem to be tropical. Around here, the sea surface temperatures, for example, rarely were come up here. It wouldn't last very long.
Obviously, we don't typically see storms going up to 50 degrees north, still tropical, so it is extraordinarily hard to get any kind of impacts in Europe from any kind of tropical cyclone, especially because of the fact that by that point they're extratropical, and that's why they have their own thing called windstorms there, so that is what they typically see. So instead of hurricanes, they have their own windstorms that they deal with.
We typically have our own windstorms. Some of them, we call them windstorms, even though they are extratropical hurricanes. But we have our own naming system for those kind of windstorms as well.
Yep, indeed. Didn't Vince hit Spain's still I think it was a tropical depression by that point, and I think the question was asking if pretty much whose storms are higher. Hurricane Faith made landfall in Norway. What?
Really? I don't think that was a thing.
Nope, I just checked. It was extratropical by then, so it was not a hurricane landfall. It went exceptionally far northward, TC. I'll give it that, but it did not make landfall as a hurricane. And of course, we are getting into the final 10 minutes of this stream, so if you have any last minute questions, be sure to get them in, and we can get as many as we can answered in the next 10 minutes before we do wrap up and go to the On the Stay segment, and of course, the next names.
Okay.
Alright, let's see here. We're looking
If it helps, I've got messages up for Henri.
Yes, that would be useful as we wait for some of those last minute questions to appear. Here is what we've got right now. The forecast track of Henri has shifted towards the northeast coast of the U.S. this weekend, and early next week, increasing the risk of direct storm surge, wind, and rain impacts in portions of northeastern U.S. and Atlantic Canada during that time. People in this area should definitely be closely following the progress of Henri and check for updates in the forecast, especially with how wide that cone is. Swells from Anri will begin to reach much of the east coast of the U.S. and Atlantic Canada by the end of the week and continue through the weekend. These swells should cause life-threatening surfing recurrence as a result, so if you live near the coast, please be mindful of that. If you have any beach plans, be mindful of that as well. Obviously, the tropical storm force wind probabilities already extend from parts of North Carolina, going up into Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, all the way up into portions of southern Canada and Maine. So that is what we were looking at in terms of that there. And we already have a 50% chance of the Cape Cod region seeing a tropical storm force winds. 50 to 60 at a pretty high percentage already, so this impact isn't probably going to be going into day 4 or 5, so the fact we're already seeing that, not a good sign.
Not a good sign at all. And here's the cone. Obviously the National Hurricane Center expected to become a hurricane, I believe on Friday at some point, 2 a.m. Friday. But again, by our analysis, we should I say this? Xavier?
Say what?
Sorry. By our analysis, what we've
got. I already explained that earlier. We did forecast to reach Category 2. Yeah, we already explained that earlier. If you want to reiterate, you can say what we have.
As of now, though, again, oh, I'm not sure. We have it. We do believe by our own analysis it is a hurricane right about now, considering the National Hurricane Center say it's still a tropical storm, but 70 miles an hour. There's not a whole lot of difference. But again, we do forecast a Category 2 out of the system. This is not a situation to be taken lightly.
Yeah, something I like to reiterate as I shut my cat up. 70 and 75 miles an hour. The only difference between the two. Oh, come on. Anyways, as I was trying to say, the difference between 70 and 75 miles an hour is just the classification. Obviously, 70 mile an hour classifies as a tropical storm. 75 classifies as a hurricane, and needless to say, there's barely any difference because of the 5 mile an hour wind difference. So, despite there being an S point, as it makes landfall, or gets really close to landfall in Cape Cod, that does not take away from the threat at all. That is still a 70 mile an hour point that they're forecasting there, which is just shy of hurricane status. The only thing that changes is the warnings and the actual classification of the storm by then. So please, sorry, Mittens is getting on my nerves. But anyways, as I was trying to say, the only thing between the difference of this is the classification. So just don't take that to heart. There is a near hurricane strength force storm that is coming to portions of New England at the current forecast track. So please be mindful of that.
Yep. Again, it may not seem like a whole lot of difference. It's just a classification, but again, we do have this forecast as a hurricane expected in a few days' time to reach Category 2 winds.
Alright, we're trying to get some more people, or more questions here. Let's see here. What's the we already went through the worst case scenario for Anri. The worst case scenario would basically be that it basically slams right into New York City, which of course would be a bad idea for Anri to do. Obviously, it looks like the models have actually trended away from that. It looks like the most that the GEFS ensembles now take it would be over into Long Island. Of course, that's still not a good idea. Not a great forecast, but there is some models that have been trying to have it not curving until it makes inland, which of course would make the impacts a little bit more prolonged there. So definitely heavy rainfall, and of course we already saw what happened with Elsa there, especially in the New York City metro. So hopefully that doesn't happen there. Apart from Grace and Henri, are there any systems in the Atlantic Basin that have your attention? There are not. We did have that tropical wave that was exiting the coast of Africa. However, it is going to be dealing with a significant load of dry air from that newest Saharan air outbreak there, so it won't be becoming anything. Models, of course, are trying to hint at something that does come towards the end of the next week. And someone did say kind of short live TWBs are usually 2 hours. They're actually always 1 hour. It's only special occasions that we go with 2. Could Anri hit North Carolina? My answer to that is no. Next question, could Grace move north after landfall in the Yucatan and hit places like Texas? Another blatant answer, no. Thoughts on the western...
No.
And thoughts on the possible tropical cyclone in the western Pacific. I'm assuming you're talking about 16W. As of right now, we have given that a 70% chance of reforming. It could become a tropical storm again. However, it's not going to be that long-lived of a peak, because, of course, it will be dealing with wind shear of its own. I can't really say for sure it's going to get a name again, because, of course, we have watched it become a tropical storm officially twice, and both times it did not get a name at all. We had the tropical storm Western Guam. Of course, 16W has lived quite a long time not to get a name, so we'll see what happens as it tries to reform.
We all know how 16W formed.
Yes.
So-
Everyone got angry about the fact that 91C basically became a TC right after it basically crossed over. So, we all know how people feel about Hode.
Yeah, how and what would? Oh, never mind. Oh dear.
But I should note, for that person that was asking about coverage, about what we're going to be planning to do, we do plan to do landfall coverage. We're monitoring the situation as of right now. Of course, a lot of the live producers that we have are either in the UK or in the East Coast, so the timing exactly is not that great for both of us. However, what I do plan to do is that we will be going live some point tonight around the time it makes landfall. If it has to be me, I'll be the one that starts it around 1 or 2 a.m. Eastern Time. 12 to 1 Central Time, and we will be running around, running that, and then Nathan should be taking over afterwards. So that is currently the live plans. We got several hours of coverage that is planned with Grace as it makes its first landfall as a hurricane tomorrow. More coverage, of course, planned on Friday night when it makes its second landfall. So that is, of course, something that we are going to be monitoring for sure. So if you think, we also have an update on Grace coming out relatively soon too, so that is something that we are working off. And last question before we do, could Anri hit New Jersey into Pennsylvania? That doesn't seem likely at the moment, but I can't exactly rule that out 100% entirely yet. So of course, we're going to be monitoring the situation, as this is a significant threat with both storms. We have Grace that's going to be making landfall tonight as a hurricane, and Henri that will be making landfall close, if not at hurricane status, if it continues on its current track of shifting west. So we will be watching that closely. New England, you need to be watching this. Mexico, you need to be watching this if you haven't already. And, well, anything in Mexico, you need to be prepared by now at this point. So that is basically my spiel on that. Thanks to our team that did consist at the end of Christian, Sam, and Dakota. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us.
At this point, I will turn off my team, and we shall go over... Well, I guess I can't really turn off my team, but we're going into the second part. And unfortunately, it's kind of a somewhat cursed on this day, given the fact that on this day 30 years ago, Hurricane Bob was off the coast of North Carolina and about to slam into New England, becoming one of the worst storms to hit there. We also had 2 tropical storms, Ellie and Glenda, but regardless, the main threat, of course, was Bob, which was much larger. In a very significant situation. Bob, of course, got retired at the spring of 1992 and replaced with Bill. Of course, Bill has been a name since. So that is, of course, what we dealt with on this day. Hopefully, we do not see any kind of repeat with that anytime soon. Just gives a reminder as to why New England needs to be preparing for these kind of storms. So, with that, the next name in the Atlantic is now Ida, followed by Julian. In the Eastern Pacific, it is now Marty, followed by Nora. And in the Central Pacific, well, let's just have the old team say it. The next name on list 1 is 1, 2, 3, Hone.
Definitely. Hone.
That didn't go as good as I thought it would. In the Western Pacific, the next name is Omaze, followed by Kansan. And in the North Indian Ocean, we're looking out for Gulab and Shaheen. Come on, guys. What was with that? I told you guys to say Hone. There we go.
I did.
Yeah, we only got one person. In the Southwestern Indian Ocean, we got Anna and Bat Sea Ray. In the Australian region, we're looking out for Patty and Ruby. And in the South Pacific, it's Cody. We'll be back for more live coverage and another live truck with a bulletin tomorrow night.
See you then.